Kia ora talofa namaste, haere mai, and welcome to the Niche Cache. This is our big old podcast where we kick back, relax, and have a big old yarn about some Aotearoa sporting matters. I'm fresh off of listening to some Cypress Hill, the Black Sunday album. And I've actually also been listening to their first album, the first Cypress Hill album, I think by the name of Cypress Hill, which did, yes, Cypress Hill 1991. And it's one of those things that I was curious if you've been listening to anything, like gone back and listening to anything that you hadn't quite listened to, because obviously I was actually born in 1991, so I wasn't ripping the Aotearoa vitamins to some Cypress Hill fresh out the womb, but I have gone back and I'm really enjoying listening to Cypress Hill. It's actually very good music. I love it, with some very funky themes as well. And shout out to some other Aotearoa music that I wasn't really fully tapped in with at the time, but it's another one where you can go back. There's obviously many things internationally and in Aotearoa, like Herbs. When the leading singer from Herbs passed away, I didn't know much about Herbs, and then you go back and listen to it. But the bit of Salmonella Dub, that goes pretty hard, along with like Rhombus. You can get a bit of Rhombus, Salmonella Dub. They had a few bangers when we were growing up. But there's also Concord Dawn, which is a little bit more drum and bassy. But that was another one that I do remember from growing up. They had a few big tunes, and I've enjoyed listening to some Concord Dawn as well as Salmonella Dub. So shout out to those Aotearoa musical acts who delivered absolute bangers and may still do. And of course, shout out to the one and only Cypress Hill for their legendary stuff as well. And I really enjoy getting into the history of Cypress Hill, because you had a bit of like DJ Muggs. That dude's a wizard. He helped The Alchemist get started back in the day, and then all the offshoots of that, learning how DJ Muggs and the Soul Assassin Records do business. Obviously Be Real is doing his thing as well. So big shout out to Cypress Hill from here in Aotearoa. Do you have any such musical ponderings fresh off the top of your dome? Because this is all just freestyle. You do seem to have paused there, and it did look like you were listening to some Cypress Hill just as you paused. So that was a good little moment there. I will ask you to answer the question once again, so we don't have to edit that out.
Yeah, well, that came back nice and quickly. So I guess sometimes the tech problems just end up being it's all part of the show. Cypress Hill, that's is that Insane in the Membrane?
In very simplistic terms, yes.
But that's, yeah, I'm thinking of the right group. Yeah. I picture them on The Simpsons. It was my first, probably a lot of, musical and artistic acts from that era probably did get introduced to a lot of people from having guest starred on The Simpsons during that time. So back when that show was very watchable. Who goes real hard from that era, it stacks up extremely well, maybe even better today than they did back then, is the Minchicks.
Yes. I might be crazy, but I'm not dumb.
There we go. I don't think they did a lot of albums. Might have even only been one or two, and then old mate Ruben Nielsen, I think, moved to America and then formed Unknown Mortal Orchestra, where he continues to do supremely good music. Love that band, but the Minchicks rock pretty hard too. Very much of a sort of, because I was listening to the Arctic Monkeys the other day. I can't remember why. They just, for some reason, I saw them in one of my feeds or something, and then was listening to a couple of the earlier albums there and thinking, man, this band was so good. And the Minchicks, very like different sound, but in their way, it had a similar sort of like For them, it was more of a like a psychedelic type rock thing. Arctic Monkeys were doing over in the UK, they were doing sort of like a generation later version of what Oasis were doing, I guess, 10, 15 years before them. Slightly different sound, but a similar attitude, you know. Um, I don't know. For some reason, that one led into that one. So that was when you're talking about what I may have been listening to from around that time. Rediscoveries. I think that first Minchick album, which has that song, "Crazy Yes Dumb No," has that song on it, is awesome. The drums on that sound so cool. It's just such a fun such it's like brilliant lead single, but also just such a fun album the whole way through. And I reckon sounds as good now as it did then.
I don't think I'm alone in thinking that Craziest Dumb No is the only song I know from the
It
Minchicks.
was, yeah, I think they probably do sound like a one-hit wonder type band because of that, because they were actually like the record's real quite weird, you know. Even that song is quite weird. Like they're doing sort of things with the different stereo tracks and um but it's such a funky song that you can't deny it. So that one did become a big hit and probably, yeah, is the one song that people remember from them. And then obviously, as I say, like main dude from there goes on to make it goes on to have a very successful and artistically fulfilling career, which is ongoing, right in his prime still with UMO. But yeah, go back and check that Minchicks album, people. Good stuff there.
I'm far from any sort of musical expert, but you mentioned the drumming for the Minchicks, and as you were talking about that, I did just have an instant flashback of the drums and Craziest Dumb No. But then also Arctic Monkeys, their drumming was pretty crazy. And you can go watch some very early Arctic Monkeys concerts. They are pretty phenomenal. So I do you can there's lots of old concerts you can go back and watch. Like there's one like Linkin Park playing in Europe somewhere, and they're going crazy for like one of their first albums. There's many. That's just one example of many old school concerts you can go watch. But I do remember some of the early Arctic Monkeys concerts, and they're playing in small venues and stuff like that. There's a couple of those things floating around that are very fun to go back and have a gaze at. I have been on a bit of a mindfulness journey, and I do actually have a copy of the Tao Te Ching with me, thanks to the wonderful libraries, specifically in Auckland, but also in Aotearoa. They are, I don't know, if you're not a member of your local library, you should sign up and get some books, because you can read a book and you can read a wide variety of books and then give it back. You don't need to have a big bookshelf behind you when you're doing Zoom calls to make yourself seem cool. Heck, you don't even need to have a bookshelf. You can just get a few books out from the library, read them, take them back. And as someone who does try to embrace a more minimalist, simple lifestyle, to me that is wondrous. So shout out to the libraries. One of the best things about being in Aotearoa is good libraries. So I do have a physical copy of the Tao Te Ching, having listened to many audio versions before falling asleep, and somehow all the audio versions are slightly different.
Translations, you know.
Yeah. So I am working my way through the Tao Te Ching book, and I do have a passage I will read in a jiffy, but I've actually been on a mindfulness journey this week because the Warriors won in Brisbane. Just another casual demolition of the Brisbane Broncos at Suncorp Stadium this year.
We've all done it.
Have you?
I can't remember if the Dragons win against Brisbane. It was their first win of the season. I can't remember if it was at Suncorp or if it was a home game, but we did well. We thrashed them in the first half, and then they came right back, and I think it was like 40-32 or something at the end of it, and they did give us a scare in the last 20 minutes. But yeah, the Dragons beat the Broncos too. We've all done it.
And you put 40 points on them.
Something like that. Yeah, it was a. I don't know. I don't remember the exact score line, but it was something. It was, it was probably the highest scoring game, and also might still catch them. in the wooden spoon race. That's actually not over yet after the Dragons finally won back-to-back games, beat the Tigres. Poor old
There are
Benji,
some
they're not good at the moment.
there are some Dragons crossover things with old mate Luke Metcalf behind me here.
Yeah,
Another bum
right.
hamstring. We will get into some Dragons crossover soon, but yes, the Broncos 2 wins over the Warriors 2 wins over the Broncos, just smoking them as usual. And I have been amazed to see some of the mainstream rugby league media. There's basically two things they're all doing right now. Can the Warriors win the premiership? Right? And Luke Metcalf got injured. Oh my God, what's happening? Well, as we know, the Warriors have won many games this season without Luke Metcalf. Actually, like a few other halfbacks have done the job for the Warriors without Luke Metcalf. So I do still find the spotlight and focus on Luke Metcalf to be a little bit ridiculous, because if we go back to the first win against the Broncos, Tanner Boyd having a fantastic start to the season, he gets injured, then Tamaiti Martin comes off the bench, helps them win the game. And I think Tanner Boyd only played 6 minutes in that game against the Broncos early in the season. So the Warriors didn't need Tanner Boyd to put 40 points on the Broncos at Suncorp Stadium. Second time around, Luke Metcalf plays 20 minutes. And the Warriors do score a few tries. They do put some points on the board. What we got there, 14-0 behind me at the time of Metcalf's injury. He gets injured. Chanel Harris-Tavita goes to halfback, sort of, and Nickel Crockstar comes into the halves after his sin bin. So again, the Warriors scored 40 points against the Broncos, which may not seem as special anymore, considering the Dragons might have done it. But
It's 30-26, the Dragons game. I was just checking.
Okay. So 40 points is still a pretty impressive thing.
But it was at Suncorp, and that is the highest scoring game of the season for the Dragons, 30 points.
Well, hit me up when you hit 40 points. So.
Yeah, well, I'll talk to you next year then.
Yeah. Maybe, because Metcalf will probably still be injured again. So this time around, Luke Metcalf gets injured, and then there's a change in the halves. Chanel Harris-Tavita goes to halfback. So that the two games against the Broncos kind of sums everything up here. Because those two games, let me remind you again, 2 wins against the Broncos, scoring 40-plus points at Suncorp Stadium. And I did in my Sunday video after that game, shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, to the rugby league videos. If the Broncos are viewed as one of the biggest clubs in Australian sport, they're viewed as one of the biggest NRL clubs or franchises, organisations, I should say. But if the Warriors go to Suncorp Stadium and overwhelm the fan bases and score 40-plus points against the Broncos, where does that leave the Warriors as the biggest sports organisation in Australasia, in the NRL? Because if the Broncos are that benchmark and the Warriors get sponsorship deals that are just as big as the Broncos, if not bigger, they smoked them in 2 games on their home stadium, the fans in Australia, the Warriors fans just completely overwhelm the Broncos fans. The Broncos aren't that big, if all of that is happening in games against the Warriors. But those 2 games in which the Warriors did score 40 points and smoked the Broncos on their home turf, 4 different dudes have played halfback in those 2 games just alone. And of course, in the 2 halfbacks who started, they're both Aussies, Tanner Boyd, Luke Metcalf. Both of them are viewed as some type of reason for why the Warriors are good, yet they both get injured in the first quarter of those games, and then the Warriors go on to score 40-plus points. Well, not 40 points afterwards, but they go on to accumulate a final total of 40 points throughout the rest of those games, with Tamaiti Martin and Chanel Harris-Tavita stepping in. to me, that sums up everything the Warriors are right now, where you've got different guys stepping into halfback, doing the job, because everything else is so good for the Warriors. And everything else is so good that I did type through some optimistic ideas about perhaps the Warriors doing the crazy thing this year. And that was on our newsletter, thenichecase.substack.com. Every Monday, every Thursday evening, we're typing out rugby league, cricket, basketball, football thoughts. So make sure you sign up to that. There's a free section. There's a paid section as well with some bonus yarns. Shout out to everyone supporting us with paid Substack subscriptions. And shout out to everyone who is in the Patreon whānau. This is very important in supporting what we do. Every week on Patreon, we do an extra cricket podcast later in the week and an extra football podcast later in the week just for the Patreon whānau. It's only a couple of dollars a month, so if you can, please consider hitting us up on Patreon, having a paid Substack subscription, or donating through Buy Me a Coffee, all of which are very useful in covering the costs of what we do, and also a little bit of pocket money. So, well, the library membership's free, so don't need to worry about reinvesting in the library membership, but just a little bit of money is great to help us what we do. And in my newsletter yarn, I did ponder how the Warriors do have one of their best attacks in the NRL. And, you know, we've talked a lot about it this season. Both wingers scored tries. Wade Egan's got try assists. All the halves have try assists, so on and so forth. They got an excellent defense, which is very important in winning an NRL championship. And you always use championship. I don't like, to me, it's just an easier word than premiership. Because I don't, like, the premiership is the premiership, and then if you win the Premier's Plate or whatever, you've won the premiership of the season. But if you win the grand final, then you're the champions of the competition. So I just prefer to use champion because it's easier to understand.
That's how they do it in the A-League. Like Auckland FC won the premiership in the first year and won the championship in the second year.
Bang.
Effectively, which
and
does
if you finish,
make more sense.
If you finish, yeah, who cares? But the Warriors, they have one of the best defenses in the NRL. So they got one of the best attacks. They got one of the best defenses. That sounds like a good recipe to win something that we can't mention because I'll get to my point in a jiffy. The Warriors are also, and these are things we haven't seen from the Warriors ever. I think the Warriors made their grand finals based on attacking flair. Off the top of my head, now I do listen to Cypress Hill, so I do enjoy the vitamins, so I have some memory issues. But 2011 maybe, I think it was, I think they just got super hot. Sean Johnson comes into the team, they ride into the grand final, 2001, 2002, whatever it was, Ali Lauatiti. Right, that to me, that sums up how the Warriors played their rugby league that year. Assuming
bit of Stacey Jones too, you know,
Stacey Jones, chip and chase, and all that stuff. This Warriors team right now, their attack is matched by their defense is matched by their attack. Both sides of the ball. And defense, I'm including wrestling, grappling, folding people up, the dark arts, all of which the Warriors are elite at doing. But they're also one of the fittest teams in the NRL. And I think this is a sneaky thing that a lot of casual fans may overlook. The Warriors are one of the fittest teams in the NRL. That's just a fact. And yes, the Dragons did beat the Tigers, but the Tigers are an interesting example of a team that just clearly doesn't look like one of the fittest teams in the NRL because they're just always bugging. As you would expect for a team that sucks. Shout out to Benji Marshall. Shout out to Kieran Foran. It's been a tough few months for the Kiwi coaches. And if we add in Ricky Henry, coach of the Cowboys in NRLW, I do think they had a win on the weekend. Not a great period for Kiwi coaches in NRL and NRLW. But we are dealing with a Warriors team that has splendid variety in attack, that has been elite in attack with a wide variety of different halves. They are one of the best defensive teams in the NRL. They're one of the fittest teams in the NRL. They're one of the best teams at the dark arts, wrestling, grappling, and doing so at a very high level so that you don't concede penalties. That's the dark arts. How can you slow the ruck down without conceding a penalty? All of which are the depth. The depth is elite as well. As we've seen in the halves, we've seen fabulous depth in all positions for the Warriors this season, which we've talked about every week. That's what you need to win an NRL championship. That's how I felt on Monday typing out my newsletter bit. And then I was like, that's all very exciting. That is all very positive. Makes me feel good. But let's drag it back a bit. Because we've got a game to win this weekend. And that's, to me, the most sane thing I can do as someone thinking deeply about the Warriors, covering the Warriors closely. Like, we can all spin yarns about how, like, the grand ideas that may or may not happen. But, and this isn't from Tao Te Ching, right? This is from James Fisher Harris. This is from Andrew Webster. Two of the great thinkers of this generation. One game at a time. 1 week at a time. And you can see that in the Warriors, everything the Warriors do, because the Warriors, classic sports mindfulness. Let's win this training session. Let's be where our feet are. Let's do our best we can with what we're doing right now. Those are things that have helped the Warriors get to this position. And at this stage of the season, we can all see there are really good, elite, fantastic things about the Warriors in the NRL. They've been to the finals a few times under Andrew Webster. They've got that experience, all those things, right? But the Warriors are playing a game of rugby league this weekend. And so that process of, because you kind of work through these sporting storylines day by day with the niche case offerings that we have. So after that newsletter bit, I spend the rest of my Monday just like trying to ground myself from those big ideas about the Warriors. And then I was like, wait, who are the Warriors playing this weekend? What's going to happen this weekend? And not only does that feel better than getting off into this airy fairy land of like Warriors pain and is this our year type of stuff, I think the wisest thing we can do as Warriors people is try to stay very present in what we're doing. This weekend, the Warriors play the South Sydney Rabbitohs in Sydney on Saturday night. Let me just double check it. Yes. Saturday night, 7:30 kickoff, Warriors versus Rabbitohs. And that will be another fun 80 minutes of Warriors Rugby League, hopefully. We got a team list to get through. We'll see what happens with the team naming. There's a few issues there. Nickel Clockstar suspended. Curiosity, intrigue about what's going to happen in that team selection. Obviously, we got the Jet Cleary situation as well. And this is another example of how chaotic and crazy things can be week to week. Hence, we just need to be present and enjoy every stage of this journey with the Warriors. And that means all the focus, all the attention for me and hopefully some people trying to chill out a wee bit and just relax themselves goes into Warriors versus Rabbitohs this weekend. And we will be talking more Warriors after Teamless Tuesday on Wednesday, maybe Thursday as well on YouTube.
Yeah, the problem with a team getting good and then the focus shifting to like, this is the year we're going to win a championship, is that you really do therefore like miss out on the fun of getting to that stage. And it becomes an all or nothing thing where like, if the Warriors were to lose in a semi-final this year, this would still have been a great season. But if you've put your entire focus on it has to be a championship, well, then that's not good. That becomes an even bigger disappointment potentially than if they missed the 8, which is should just that's a lopsided kind of way of viewing things. You gotta take it week by week, because you can only control what happens week to week as terms of like from the perspective of the players, but from the fans' perspective too, you got to take it week for week because it's fun when you have a good team. And many years through a lifetime of supporting any particular sports team, there will be times where it's like, I don't know, 5 straight years where you don't have a team that's anywhere near this good. Or the Warriors fans know exactly what this is because they've been through it in the past. Like many years where they're not competitive and you don't necessarily look forward to the game each week. It doesn't become the highlight of the weekend, and you don't get that sort of like that glorious afterglow of a great victory, for example, away against the Broncos at Suncorp or something like that. So when you do, trust that like whatever happens afterwards will take care of itself, because if you do go week to week and they end up, eventually that week is a finals game. Eventually that week might even be a grand final at some stage, maybe. But it doesn't matter yet, because A, it hasn't happened yet, and B, like you have to enjoy the journey, because the journey's kind of the whole purpose. And the championship wouldn't mean as for a hypothetical championship for whoever it happens to be. Let's say the Panthers have been winning the Broncos last year won a championship. Now they might get wooden spoon. There's a great example right there, just in their case, about how quickly things can change and why you need to savor the good times, but also like you don't want to waste it when you have that. And part of having that is going through the building up to the whatever the season ends up being. It's the wins throughout the regular season. It's the little milestones along the way that convince you how good the team is and what they're capable of. But you still have to go through those milestones, and it's so much of the fun of supporting a good team is that. And the people who just sit back and be like, it's gonna, because you see this with teams that do win a lot of championships, where it becomes like, well, we won it last year, so we have to win it again. Sort of like everything becomes not as important. It's a means to an end to get us back to the stage we were at last year, and that is just I don't think that means as much. And also you have to win the first one. You have to go through all that before you even have that opportunity anyway. But I think that you gotta take the whole roller coaster. It's not just the dips or whatever. It's not just the fun bits where you throw your arms up. You got to be through the whole journey. It's the start to finish that makes the entirety as rewarding as it is, if and when that ever happens. Because some of us don't. Speaking NRL, I actually have supported a team that won an NRL championship during the time I've been supporting them, so I can say that. But it was a very long time ago, and my team hasn't been very good for a very long time. Maybe next year. They are actually a lot of fun to watch these last couple of weeks, which is weird considering how it was the worst they've ever been for a couple of months before that. But the journey is the reward, and the journey is the purpose. And if you're losing focus of that, you're kind of doing it wrong.
And like, there's a very interesting challenge coming up against the Rabbitohs. And it's like each game you learn something more about the Warriors in this case. Whether it's a different halves combination, whether it's Chanel Harris-Tavita playing alongside 3 different halves and like 3 different centers, a couple of different wingers, a couple of different edge forwards as well. Whether it's the young players who step in, Eddie Onamia, Tanastawa Smith, Jacob Laban, Like all these guys just coming in, you learn about the system, you learn about the development process of the Warriors, you learn about, oh, so this is why James Fisher Harris is the best. Because this is the impact he has on his teams, as we have seen many games this season, but also against a team like the Broncos, who, yes, they have good players in their forward pack, but they're not ruthless. They're not James Fisher Harris and Mitchell Barnett and Aaron Clark. And it's like, yeah, there's these good players, some of the best players, but they don't have the tinge, the ruthless bully aspect that I think this Warriors forward pack does have. You learn about those things week to week. And we've got another game coming up against the Rabbitohs away in Sydney, where there'll be another monstrous crowd of Warriors fans. But I am curious, like, do you think Luke Metcalf will play 15 games in any season with the Dragons?
History says no, but one advantage he will have at the Dragons is that he won't have to be a goal kicker. Because as Valentine Holmes is there, he will be the #1 goal kicker, and there are a couple of other options that they'll have around. Maybe that's one of those things you say, we watched you pull a hamstring kicking a goal against the Broncos last season. We don't need to do that again.
But
he will need to run.
He's also done a hamstring running. Like,
yeah, that's what I mean. Like, he will also have to be a half who can show a bit of zip and threat with his feet. So I hope so, but there's not a lot of evidence in the backlog of his career to say that he will.
I think half of your wins this season have come against the Tigers.
2 out of 4.
Yeah, you got 4 wins, 2 against the Tigers, which is the Benji Marshall team. Like, do you have any? You've played not every team plays every team twice, but you have played the Tigers twice this season. The Warriors have played the Tigers twice this season, and the Tigers actually beat the Warriors at Mount Smart Stadium when Luke Metcalf was playing number 6 before he got injured for the first time this season, coming back from injury, and then he got injured again. So I think he's played 4 games this season. He has played 15 games in one season with the Warriors, but he's never played more than 15 games in his NRL career. That seems like a interesting mix to then pay big money for. If the best ability is availability, and then you're investing a lot of salary cap space in a player who is not available for half the season, that just seems like an interesting move to make. But we have seen a lot of the Tigers, and they have graced the Dragons with 2 wins. And the Dragons have 2 wins. The Warriors only have 1 win against the Tigers this season. And maybe that's it is an interesting moment for those 2 Kiwi coaches, with the Sea Eagles sliding down the ladder and the Tigers just being an absolute shit show, to be honest, as they usually are. Do you have any observations or insights about how the Dragons dismantled the Tigers?
Well, you know what was funny about that game is the Dragons did make a few mistakes in the first half. It was a little bit like 2 not very good teams trying to go set for set, and the Dragons started dropping the ball and giving away penalties and stuff, and kept it maybe closer than it should have been. But it felt like once the Dragons ironed that stuff out, they kind of just, of course, I'm looking at this through a little bit of a biased lens, but it felt like that was a game they would win if they took care of business. And for the most part, they did, until maybe the last 10 minutes, and the Tigers started throwing the ball around, and suddenly they became absolutely terrifying, from being like a team that was playing, I don't think scared is the right way, but playing like they were overly cautious because they were worried about making mistakes, and they were worried about trying to, what was for them, I guess, a winnable game as well, trying to match the Dragons in various areas, and just not wanting, it sort of worked for them in the first 20-25 minutes, because they were slightly edging a very conservative, boring arm wrestle of a game, and then the Dragons started to get a few attacks and it got a bit more fun. But the Tigers started going like offloads and extra phases and shifting side to side and running a lot, and Luai doing little fake pop passes and swiveling, and Dewey looking to change angles and stuff, and they were terrifying for the last 10 minutes. And I was sitting there like biting my nails thinking, oh, the Dragons going to be able to hold on to this? I'm not sure. And then Loko Pacific Tonga makes a pretty incredible, like, for a front row, like if an effort play running from one side to the other to cut down a attack, to make a tackle for a dude, and, off the back of a line break, probably saved the game doing that. And Dragons did hold on and win. But it's a weird thing to come away from that being like, well, the Tigers were kind of bang average, looked like an out of form team, right up until the point where they had nothing left to lose and they started playing some footy against a vulnerable Dragons team. And they looked awesome for like 10 minutes, but ran out of time. So I don't know if that's a lesson to take onwards, or if that's maybe something that was just a state of the game, or maybe only applies to when you're playing the team at the bottom of the table. I don't know, but it was a weird experience because they felt completely beatable right up until the point where they looked a little bit unstoppable. And the Dragons kind of just held on for that, which, Dragons will take a win any way they can get it. But that probably stings a bit if you're a Tigers fan watching that kind of thing. You're wondering, well, why didn't you just maybe play with a little bit more fizz a little bit earlier, spread that stuff out throughout the game? You might have been a different story.
I think the Dragons have 2 wins in a row after local derby against the Sharks last week.
Yep,
Sharks
first time for a year.
Sharks are a pretty weird team themselves, but everything you're describing there with the Tigers, and it's the same vibe with the Warriors women, because the Warriors women, week to week and like quarter to quarter of a game, very hectic, very chaotic, excellent 10 minutes here, horrible 10 minutes there, excellent 10 minutes to get back in the game, horrible 5 minutes to finish the game, that type of stuff. I still think there may be some individual brilliance and improvements in the Warriors women to keep them in the finals mix for NRLW, but it's all the opposite of the Warriors men, because the Warriors men are reliable, they're consistent, they're steady, there's like a baseline, what to expect mid-game, game to game, and that's another very good thing about this Warriors team that has me optimistic about this weekend versus the Rabbitohs. The Warriors women are now 6th on the ladder. They had a loss to the Tigers. Shout out to Racy McGregor, Kiwi Ferns half. She was awesome. Shanice Monchel, who made a Kiwi Ferns debut last year. She was also pretty good, having moved from the Bulldogs to join the Tigers. Tigers are now 4th in NRLW, so they are much better than the men's Tigers. The Warriors still have games coming up against the Roosters and the Dragons, who are 2 of the best teams. So it's going to be interesting to see how they go. Let me take my own advice and see who the Warriors women are playing this week. Let me get back into the moment. They're taking on the Roosters on Sunday afternoon. So it's going to be a tricky battle. And also shout out to the Gold Coast Titans. They're 2nd on the ladder, 6-1. They got Georgia Hale, averaging like 40 tackles per game with something close to 98% efficiency. She's been fantastic, another veteran Kiwi Fern. But the Titans also have Whanua Ramoni, who is now 19 years old. She's from Wellington, a Wainuiamata junior, who has played 6 games this season for the Titans as a starting prop. And the Titans have won all 6 games with her in the team. And there is some interesting stuff happening here with Wellington Rugby League, because by my accounts, I've got a lot of women from Wellington entering NRL systems, and we still have a solid crew of men. The men's crew is led by Joseph Tapine, Jerome Hughes. Jacob Laban's prominence keeps growing. He's a Te Aroha junior, also had some time with Randwick. Dayon Amatuanai is in the Warriors system as well. The Warriors also have Maui Winitana Patalaseo and Desmond Laban in their under-21s New South Wales Cup group. We had Riwete Narimu. He played NRLQ for the Cowboys this year, coming out of Scots College. He must have a junior rugby league club as well, because he did represent Wellington in rugby league. I just couldn't find it. And the Sharks under-21s team has Pharrell Gray, who is a Victoria Hunters junior. He is a very interesting wing prospect, so watch out for Pharrell Gray with the Sharks. But then we get into the women's pipeline. I mentioned Whanua Ramoni from Wainuiamata. The Tauenio sisters, all Wainuiamata juniors. That's Alexis, Trinity, and Paige. There's also Jessica Patia, who's in the Panthers system. She's a Wainuiamata junior. Billy Va'a is in the Eels system. She's a Wainuiamata junior. So I think we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 women from Wainuiamata Rugby League in NRLW-ish systems, because the Panthers don't have an NRLW team. But Jessica Patia is their starting centre in the Women's Premiership. We got a Randwick combination with Tirokura Leaf and Luca Bele Natueri Ongli. They are both in the Roosters reserve grade group coming out of Randwick. Warriors have Mariri Puketapu, who's a Te Aroha junior. Monica Tangawai's playing NRLW for the Bulldogs. I think she's a former Kiwi Fern who came through Mara St. Pat's Rugby Union. And Saracen Oliver, one of many players who have had a brief stint with the Bulldogs. She is now up in Brisbane playing Queensland Women's Premiership, coming out of Petone Rugby League. So I've got 5, 6, 7, 11 women in that list, and we've got 8 men. So we almost got as many Wainuiamata women's juniors as we have Kiwi NRL players from Wellington. So it's a nice little snapshot of Wellington. Forgive me if I missed anyone, but that's just my best effort. And I'm going to keep talking because I do have my passage from Tao Te Ching, and I did find one of my favorite things to listen to because it makes you think. This is verse 11, the importance of what is not. We join 30 spokes to the hub of a wheel, yet it's the center hole that drives the chariot. We shape clay to birth a vessel, yet it's the hollow within that makes it useful. We chisel doors and windows to construct the room, yet it's the inner space that makes it livable. Thus do we create what is to use. Thus do we create what is to use, what is not. That's a very confusing last sentence, but the idea is that your cup is useful because of the empty space. Your room is useful because of the empty space that you then fill up with your possessions and yourself. But your cup is only useful because it's empty, so you can put something into it. So it's the empty space that is the most useful thing.
Yeah, I got my own copy of that book within arm's reach. So when you said verse 11, I just grabbed that and was like looking through it as you were reading it and seeing how different the translation is. That last line in this one says, we work with the substantial, but the emptiness is what we use. So I like the thuses, but there was fairly straightforward translation in this one. I think this is just one of the, it's not going to show up on the thing. Books don't do that very well, but I think this is just one of them. I don't know where I got this from. It's got an ugly cover, so it's probably just like from the bargain bin at the warehouse or something like that. So it might not be the esteemed might not be the translation they use at universities and stuff like that, but it's it does the trick, I guess.
and this is another sentence in the description. In this verse, the inactive part is the most functional. And it's the importance of what is not. It's the emptiness that is the most important thing. It is the space we leave that is the most important thing. It's not the action we take. It's not the wall. Like, the walls are important because they create the space, the empty space within.
Yeah, I guess like it's not a room if you don't have walls, but also if you have the walls and then the room is filled up with stuff and it's not a room you can use. It's someone else's room that's already been used. So yes, I see the vision, I see the wisdom, I see different translation coming around to the same thing.
Well,
I guess that's how those things work.
Hit us with your translation.
The full one.
Yeah, just the passage.
Yeah, so you can read along the way I just read along to your one.
Still good.
30 spokes are joined together in a wheel, but it is the center hole that allows the wheel to function. We mold clay into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that makes the vessel useful. We fashion wood for a house, but it is the emptiness inside that makes it livable. We work with the substantial, but the emptiness is what we use.
Yeah, your version's much better. That's the version I'm more familiar with.
It's a little more poetic because it puts the lines in the same, like second line is the emptiness repetition bit. So I get, see with it. But yours came from the library, so I respect it a little bit more than the bargain bin at the warehouse. But still, wherever you find the words,
Right, we did have a few Breakers signings. They've finalized their input spots. What did you make of those moves? The one move, I think it was.
One move last week, and then the other import they signed like a week or so earlier. So yeah, they have announced 2 new imports. Charles Bidiaco, and I haven't read. I've got to find the right thing because Triple J, and it's not Jaren Jackson Jr. It is
Josiah Jordan James.
That's him, Josiah Jordan James. There we are, who comes to us from a country we don't need to mention, using a previous Breakers head coach, Mr. Dan Shamir, who's the general manager at his former club. He didn't want to stay in that country because there's a war going on. So he helped him get a gig with the Breakers, which was nice of him. So there's a nice little setup there from a previous coach helping out a new coach. Sharing imports. He's what did I write about this dude? He's sort of like very much a defensive maestro. Will be seen as like I guess a little bit of a glue guy type. He's also an excellent 3-point shooter, and that's definitely been something that they've targeted throughout the preseason because before, like their earlier signings were guys like Dejan Vasiljevic and Kuat Noi, Australians who have won NBL championships who are also excellent 3-point shooters. So there's probably 3 main things you've seen from the Breakers and how they're addressing what happened last year, and then how they're building a roster for new coach Mr. Herbert, where like championship level experience has been something they've targeted.
Is that Patrick
Herbert?
Herbert?
Defense has been something. Patrick Herbert, not quite. Interesting game from him on the weekend. There was some rocks and diamonds involved there.
Former Dragon Patrick Herbert. I did have some issues with names
former Dragon
last
and
week.
Warrior.
Yeah, that's true. I did have some issues with names last week, so I was just clarifying that the new Breakers coach is, I think he's Gordon Herbert.
Yeah, Gordon Herbert.
Not Patrick Herbert. So shout out to Patrick Herbert and Gordon Herbert.
Yeah, a little bit more so Gordon, because Patrick got picked off a couple times by the Dragons, and if that's your sort of defensive input, that's not ideal. But he did have a couple nice moments going the other way. So,
just on the topic though, I would imagine that Herbie Farnworth is Herbert John Felix Farnworth. So shout out
Herbert John Felix Farnworth. Yep. You've got to go by Herbie at that stage, I guess. It's not always the first choice nickname, but yeah. Um,
Personally, I would shorten Herbal to Herbie, not Herbert.
Herbs.
No, just
Um,
Herbal, and then that's how I get to Herbie. Because Herbie is a cool name.
the Herbs is a good band, so
Yeah.
but that name's taken. Um, what was I saying? Yeah, the championship experience, upgraded defense, and 3-point shooting. And most of their non-New Zealand additions fill at least two, if not all three of those categories. So seems like pretty handy recruitment. They're putting together a nice roster there. Parker Jackson Cartwright is sticking around for what is this, his third or maybe even fourth season coming up with the team. To the extent that they had media day like last week or something, and or at least he did some media stuff, and was talking about trying to get New Zealand citizenship and maybe one day playing for the Tall Blacks. So cool. Like we don't tend to be a nation that needs to get like homegrown kind of, what do you call them? You know, naturalized citizens in the Tall Blacks team. But if there's a guy available, sure, he'd make Tall Black squads. And he is a point guard who can create stuff, and maybe that's one of those positions. Point guard and wing always seem to be positions we struggle with a little bit, just for depth when it comes to the Tall Blacks, and probably also Tall Ferns. Um, Always good for like hard-edged, defensive-minded shooting guards and big men and power forwards. We always seem to be great with those. It's the other spots that maybe don't produce quite as many of. So that's cool from Parker Jackson Cartwright. Whether that ever comes to fruition, like I don't think he could get citizenship before the next World Cup. So I don't know if that's actually something that will happen. Like he wouldn't have had the residency period to meet that. But it's a nice commitment from him. Suggests that he's in it for the long haul. The more interesting stuff, though, because when it comes to signing Aussies, you just those are nice additions, but they're sort of like they're role players that'll be cool. They'll help the team be better, but they're not the exciting additions. The imports usually are the exciting additions, but you don't know until you've actually seen them play. No one's following every single American around the world to know who's up to what and how they'll fit in and everything until you actually start to see the games. So for me, the exciting stuff is seeing the first couple of development player spots announced and also a training player spot. So development wise, they have added Kale Robinson, who is a very good 3-point shooter, although he didn't shoot that well from deep in the recent NBL season where he was playing for, was it Franklin, I think? I did write it down somewhere. He came from Northern Kentucky University, but he actually didn't do 4 years at Northern Kentucky. He played, I think he was playing outside Division One, and then he transferred to the Div One school for his senior year, and then had a really good season there. And then yes, played for the Franklin Bulls, where he played 30 minutes a night, 11 points, 5.4 rebounds, 1.3 assists and steals. So good stuff from him. That's gotten him a Breakers development spot, as has Takaho Cooper, who's been re-signed from last year's quartet. I think who was it? Because last year they had Alex McNaught, who's been there for about 3 or 4 years as a DP. So I don't know if they'll bring him back, because how many years are you going to stick around as a development player before someone else gets that spot? Liam Judd and Jack Andrew were the other two, but they're already 25, and you've got to be under 25 to be a DP. So I don't know exactly when the cutoff. It might still be possible for them to squeeze one last year in, but I would imagine they might have aged out of that. So probably see 2 new ones in the other 2 spots. But yes, Kale Robinson has gotten one of those. Takaha Cooper has been re-signed. And then there's a training player, because they've also added Tobias Cameron after his tremendous finals run for the Southland Sharks, winning a championship there and doing a whole lot of stuff that's going to make most teams that he plays on look better, doing that kind of work. A little bit of everything. He plays extremely hard. He's just a really fun player. Felt like that was a bit of a little bit of a breakthrough season for him as well in ways. Not necessarily a massive one in terms of the points scored and everything, but it just felt like maybe he had emerged into a role that he can take onwards into the rest of his professional stuff. And to be honest, that probably didn't start with the Southern Sharks. It probably started with his stint playing in England before that. So that's an interesting one, because that's a training spot. That is not a full roster spot. He isn't actually eligible to play. I would imagine he would be a designated replacement, though, if someone gets injured. He will be. There's a great quote from I don't think it was from Dylan Boucher. It might have just been from the press release about signing him, where it said his job is to provide relentless daily competition during practices, which you always need someone given a bit of relentlessness in training, I guess. So holding the standards for other guys, but also Aotearoa spent a lot of time in the last 12 months out injured. And from what I gather, he's still not expected to be fit for at least another month, which is potentially crossing over into towards, definitely through preseason, getting close to the start of the actual season. Not sure when the dates are actually, but he's pushing close to that. Tobias Cameron feels like a pretty ready-made replacement. If Le'afa's not ready to go, then you have him as your injury replacement for however long it takes. And if Le'afa happens to get injured again at some stage, well, you've got Tobias Cameron providing relentless daily competition in training and ready to go if and when that opportunity comes around. So he's like exactly the right kind of guy you'd want to do that stuff. And there is, while he's not a rostered player right now, there is a pretty clear way in which he might get onto the court for them as an injury replacement with a guy in a very similar position to him who happens to be struggling with I don't know if it's something you say long term. He's had a couple of sort of extended injury breaks in the last wee while. So Aotearoa unfortunately is prone to that, and Tobias Cameron is his insurance policy.
It does make me think about rugby league, because Andrew Webster's always talking about the players who line up against the NRL team in training and how important those players are in the training environment. So that relentlessness in training is very important if you're bringing that, like, not only are you doing it, yeah, we're training hard and all that stuff, but if you're NBL, NRL quality training against the team, the NRL, the NBL team, that's only going to make your trainings better. So that's a very real thing. But also, it'll be like if Kyle Flanagan signs a cheap deal with the Dragons because their new recruit halfback can't play a full season. That's the Le'afa situation, right? He has been
also very
injury.
real, that one you just described.
Like that, Le'afa is, as you said, like he's been battling injury. I've literally seen him courtside more than I have seen him playing basketball over the last year or so. And he's always very engaged. He's always there. He's part of the group and all that stuff. But right now, if he's in your top tier NBL squad for the Breakers, you do need someone behind him to cover that position, I do believe. Of course, they have PJC, who I don't even think like the Tall Blacks need to be desperate to get PJC. They don't need to rush that citizenship through. Right?
It's telling that was him who comes out and says that rather than New Zealand basketball or anything, I guess. Because I agree. There's no need for him, but he would be an interesting addition. Generally speaking, though, players say stuff like that a lot more than it actually happens. There's quite a few steps to get down the line for that.
And of course, they do have Vasiljevic, who's a good shooter. So they already have depth to cover that Le'afa absence. But then, as you said, there's a clear pathway for Cameron to get into the mix because he's the same position as Le'afa, and based on what I saw in the NBL, although I haven't seen Le'afa play recently, I don't feel like... Now, I'm going to make sure I say the full name just in my mind so I know I'm talking about the right Cameron brother, Toby Cameron. Toby Cameron's not far off Le'afa in terms of basketball quality. Like, I've seen Toby Cameron play very good basketball. I don't feel like Liafa is just way, way, way better than Toby Cameron. So I think that's an interesting mix. And Toby Cameron is someone I think who could, if he gets an opportunity, like Te Maire Martin or something like that, he could shake things up in that roster. We've also had the New Zealand, what are we doing? Under 18 men are playing at the Asia Cup. And this under 18 team does have Jackson Ball, Aubrey Chunga from the Wellington Saints grand final team, Cole Hopoi, I've heard you talk about him before, and a bunch of other excellent emerging basketballers from Aotearoa. And as is the case with New Zealand age group basketball teams, they're pretty damn good, because the under-18 men's team have had a 67-58 win over Syria, 86-42 win over Bahrain, 113-62 win over Lebanon. Any key players you want to talk through here?
Well, the interesting thing about that team is that they have won all three games. They haven't really been challenged a whole lot in any of them, because the first game, which was the only one that was close on the scoreboard, they had a horrendous shooting game. Like they shot 4 of 30 from 3-pointers in that game. A lot of that problem being Jackson Ball, which is where it gets interesting, because we just seen the under-17 World Cup, which was very much built around one star player and then everyone else chipping in around him with Jaden Cecil. This is, I mean, with Jackson Ball and the stuff he has done already in his career, there is a case to say that there could have been something, not to the same extent, but there could have been something here where it'd be like the team revolves around Jackson Ball. And sometimes it does. He has top scored, I think, in 2 of their 3 games, and he's their best point scorer overall. But he's kind of responsible for a lot of those missed threes. And I was watching a fair bit of the first half last night against Lebanon, where they won very handily. And it's like, I don't know if I need to see Jackson Ball taking 12 3-point attempts in a game. Like, sometimes he is excellent with them. He has a good shot, so I think that's something that will develop quite a bit further in his game. But also, like, he's so slick when he gets onto the dribble. Like, when he doesn't shoot, with a little pump fake and then like little spin move around his markers, like, he moves so smoothly, and he's a very good finisher around the rim in those spots. Is really developing for him, and he's strong and can take contact and get to the free throw line. So I don't really need you to be a spot up shooter here. I want to see you put the ball on the ground and barge your way to the hoop a fair bit more, because I think that is the kind of stuff that'll see you scoring like 25 to 30 points in these games. But they haven't been challenged in these early games. They've beaten who was it? Syria, Bahrain, and Lebanon. And the last 2 of those, they won by pretty extensive margins. So it has been a bit more of a case of like spreading it out. No one, I don't think, has scored 20 points in a game in any of these 3 ones. And that's all it's got to be. Like, this is the group stage. It'll get a little bit tougher after this. Generally, how this has gone the last couple of years is that New Zealand is normally the second best team at these, and Australia is quite a bit better than anyone else. So we always hope to avoid them until the grand final, which is how the brackets worked out for this one. So we wouldn't play them until the final. We won't have to meet them in the semi-final. So hopefully can get through the likes of, Japan, South Korea, will be other pretty challenging teams at this tournament. That'll be a bit more about where you see it. But through the group stages, it's just been about like sharing the minutes around and letting a lot of guys have a go. And Jackson Ball often sets the tone. But then, Aubrey Chunga's there. Cole Hopper, like you mentioned, Hunter Saville had a good game in this later one. In fact, against Lebanon, I'm looking at the box score here, and they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 players took the court, and 9 of them scored at least 9 points. All except one scored at least 9 points, and nobody scored 20 points. Jackson Ball topped with 19. So everyone is spreading it around. The only guy who scored less than that was Harry Kelso with 5 points, but he had a team high 7, equal team high 7 assists. I don't know, Robertson also had 11 and 7. So this is early phase competition stuff. We'll see how they look in the knockouts, which is what will actually define how they go at this tournament. Remember, it is also qualifying for the next under 19, under 20, whichever one it is, World Cup. So they do need to finish. I think it's normally top 4 for those, but they should be targeting a grand final appearance where they'll probably get thrashed by Australia, but getting to that stage is the important bit because that's what they're capable of. And we'll see like the rotations settle a little bit more when they get there because you're allowed to spread the minutes around when you're winning by 30, 40, 50 points. But what has been interesting about this is how it hasn't been just the Jackson Ball show. He's had his little moments. He's probably taken a few too many deep shots, but also he's putting up points. He's leading the way, but he's not leading the way by much. There's a lot of other players out there who are chipping in and knocking down their own shots and grabbing rebounds and throwing assists around. And in fact, I think in that game, what are we looking at with assists? What did I say? 10 players took the court, and 8 of them had multiple assists. So there's a fair bit going on there in terms of ball movement, in terms of different contributions, guys getting the ball in their hand and making things happen. So good, enjoyable stuff. And we will see how they go when it comes into the games that really matter in the next few days.
Righto, let's get into some football, and it's with great joy. We start with domestic local football, where we've got Chatham Cup and Sheppard Cup finals on the radar, both of which will be played in Christchurch, I believe, the enclosed stadium of Christchurch, which will be a great first major football event, I'd imagine, at that stadium. So there'll be a great occasion. Yeah. And am I right in saying that Cashmere Technical will be in both finals?
They will, which is what's convinced them to host it in Canterbury for the first time in, I think, since 2013, when Cashmere Tech were also, when it was the last time, definitely the Chatham Cup was down there. In recent years, it's been they've put the Chatham Cup and the Sheppard Cup men's and women's knockout competitions on the same day, so you'd have them back to back, alternating each year as to which one goes first and which one goes second. And it will be a Cashmere Technical extravaganza because they've qualified for both of them. Which last week the Cashmere Tech women's team won on Saturday to clinch their championship, their league championship, South Island Leagues, so best team in the South Island. Didn't win it last year, won it this year. On the same day, Cashmere Tech men, I think, didn't play until the Sunday, but on the same day, a result elsewhere with, I think it was Nomads beating Ferrymead Bays, meant that Cashmere Technical men also clinched their championship on the same, the same Saturday. And then coming through to this weekend, the very same weekend, you had Cashmere Technical women 1-0 down after 87, 88 minutes against the Wellington Phoenix Reserve. Same team that beat them at the same stage semi-finals last year, but that was up in Wellington. And they lost because Amber DeWitt scored like a 90th minute goal for the Phoenix Reserves. Amber DeWitt, who's actually from Christchurch. Not from Cashmere Technical, I don't think, though. She played for Canterbury United alongside many of those Cashmere Technical players, but I believe was actually from Nomads. She's no longer with the Phoenix Reserves because she's gone over to college in the United States. That was what happened last year. Late goal doomed Cashmere Tech to defeat against the Wellington Phoenix. They make it to the semi-finals again this year. This time it's a home game against the Wellington Phoenix Reserves, a rematch. And this time they're the ones who score not just 1, but 2 late goals. Equalizer in the 89th minute and then a winner in stoppage time. Anya Stefan running through to wrap that thing up at the end. So they're through to the final. And then the Cashmere Tech blokes also had to come from behind. I think the following day they played Napier City Rovers. And this is the lead, like the champions of the South Island versus the team that's currently leading the way. I won't say likely to win the Central League, but they are ahead with a couple rounds to go. There's still a very close battle, though, with them and Wellington Olympic, and I think Miramar Rangers are still technically around there, hanging in. They play Miramar next, so I think that's think that's right, which will be a massive contest. But before that, Napier City Rovers had to try and beat Cashmere Technical, also in Christchurch, and they did take the lead, scored directly from a corner in like the 9th or 10th minute. But of course, Garvin Coughlin scored a goal pretty soon afterwards to equalise, and then Lyle Matheson with a banger early in the second half, and Cashmere Technical came from behind, did it with a lot more time to spare than their women's team. Didn't quite wait till the last minute in stoppage time, but they got the job done earlier in the second half and then held on for a bit of a barrage at the end where Napier's just literally chucking the ball with long throws into the penalty area, but also whipping in corners, whipping in crosses from open play, free kicks every time they could get, every opportunity they could get to put the ball in the box, and that was causing chaos, but Cashmere Tech held on and they advanced. So both Cashmere Technical teams have won their South Island leagues. Both of them are into the final of the National Cups and are also going to be hosting them by virtue of both getting them there. It was kind of the trigger for New Zealand football to say, well, let's host it there as well. It will be Cashmere Technical women are playing Eastern Suburbs in their final. Eastern Suburbs leading the way in Auckland, who won 6-0 against Ellerslie in their semi-final. So that's a tough one for Cashy Tech there. Eastern Suburbs, even away, should probably be the favourites there. Cashmere Technical men will be hosting Fencibles, who won 3-0 against Nelson Suburbs in their semi-final and are having a superb year in the Northern League. Not a team on paper that looks like it should be competing with the likes of Auckland City and Eastern Suburbs and Birkenhead, who were 2 games away from going undefeated through the entire Northern League. They've already wrapped it up. But Birkenhead were knocked out of the Chatham Cup, their only defeat all season, by Fencibles. So, yeah, Fencibles have had a tremendous year. A couple of bad results just in the league recently, which might see them miss out on National League. We'll see how that goes because that's not over yet. But got the job done in the Chatham Cup semi-final, and they will be playing Cashmere Technical men in the Cup final. That is the first time that Fancies have made a Chatham Cup final. It is, I think, the 4th time since 2013 that Cashmere Technical men have made a Chatham Cup final, which no other club in the 14 or so years that encompasses has made it more than twice, and they've now done it for a 4th time. And big Englishman defender Tom Schwartz will have played in all 4 of those because he's likely to be captaining them when they line up at the Undercover Stadium in Christchurch. First football game held there. There is an all-whites game going to be played there against India in November, but this one will beat them by 2 months. So, yeah, it should be good. Cup final day is always a bit of a blast, and look forward to that one.
I wonder if that all-whites game versus India will be happening at the same time as Black Caps versus India. That'll be interesting, but it does highlight the status of football in Christchurch. And specifically, congratulations to Cashmere Technical. But you've got 2 Christchurch teams in the national finals, Kate Sheppard Cup, Chatham Cup, 2 of the most prestigious football competitions in Aotearoa. And this is part of everything else we're seeing in New Zealand sport. Like the rugby league in Christchurch specifically is going crazy. We know cricket, that Christchurch and Canterbury region is a hub of cricketing excellence. Canterbury Rams did have a back-to-back championship stint. They're producing players. Like, I'm sure there's got to be some Cantab in that New Zealand under-18 squad. There may not be, but we do know that there's that Holmes dude who played in the NBL for the Canterbury Rams coming out of Canterbury basketball. Canterbury basketball is as good as any other region in Aotearoa. Obviously, folks in Auckland are going to say, no. But, I mean, they had back-to-back championships and they're producing a lot of young talent. We're seeing more and more footballers come out of Christchurch. Like, this is the growth of sport in Aotearoa. And although Cashmere Technical, as you said, have made a few Chatham Cup finals, I don't think they would have done so with their women's team also in the Kate Sheppard Cup, which then does lead to Christchurch hosting the grand finals in these 2 competitions.
I think it's the first time that Cash Tech women have made the Kate Sheppard Cup final. They're definitely the first South Island team to make it for about 4 or 5 years. It used to be Coastal Spirit dominated in Christchurch, and the tides have shifted since then. I'll give you a name here: Hawani Ifopo from Canterbury basketball. He's the dude in that under-18s team. So yes, there is a guy, coincidentally, a big man who was watching him grabbing a bunch of tough rebounds. I didn't jot down his name. I jotted down his number, seeing him bump a guy off to grab an offensive board in that Lebanon game, thinking, who's that? I got to make sure I check who that is. That's who that is, and he's from Canterbury. What do you know?
Also in the footballing realms, Chris Ward scored a pen for Nottingham Forest in a preseason game, and Tyler Bindon got a bit of action as well.
A little bit, yeah. That was their last preseason game, and it was a little bit weird because it was basically a second 11 that played, and Chris Wood was in that second 11, and I'm not sure if that's telling us that maybe he won't be starting under the new manager to begin the next season, or maybe it might be saying he just needed the minutes, and it made more sense because the first 11 played a behind closed doors game a few days earlier, and Wood had skipped their previous preseason game with just like a minor niggle that they said wasn't anything, but we don't want to risk him. So it would make sense if that's the case. You don't want to risk him. We'll play him in the later game. That's 2 days later rather than the first game. So that's like, we'll see come start of the season which way that goes, whether he's starting or whether he's playing off the bench. But the fact he played this game doesn't necessarily mean he won't be starting for that reason, because there is a logical way to explain how it might have been the other way around. Bindon getting some minutes at the end is more like probably a precursor to him going out on loan. That's been expected all along, but it's a great bit of development for him to have had a full preseason with a Premier League club, with Nottingham Forest, leading up to that kind of loan. So we await to see how that goes. And there's a few different, like Matt Dibley-Diaz at some stage, I would imagine, is getting loaned out from Fulham, probably not to a championship club like we'd expect of Bindon, but he should be getting something. Got a little bit quiet there in the transfer stuff, but I think there's 2 weeks left now, so that ought to be ramping up again. So you kind of if you're going to make transfers, you want to make them at the start of preseason, or you want to make them at the end of preseason. And we're coming into that end of preseason where, yeah, might get a couple of things going down.
We also had a goal for Finn Sermon with Portland. How's Finn Sermon going in the MLS?
Well, the question with Finn Sermon in the MLS is how long will he stay there? Because we asked, like when I'm talking about business that might get done towards the end of the transfer window, like he is probably the highest profile player who might be getting a permanent move. Callum McCoward as well is still in the mix, although I haven't heard any rumors about McCoward that aren't Minnesota United, and I have heard a lot of rumors about Minnesota United that aren't Callum McCoward, which suggests maybe they've decided they can't afford the fee and they're moving on to other targets. But there's 2 weeks to go, so we'll see. There's like things change very, very quickly in football. But Finn Sermon is like clearly has a future above the MLS, which is a good league, a good spot to have a very good career hanging around that level. But he's better than that. He's one of our highest caliber potential players, and there's been whispers about probably a move to England would be most likely. He was born in Wales, so he can get a UK passport very easily, which is always a hurdle for a lot of fellas. It's a nice one to be able to avoid, which makes him an attractive transfer prospect for them, or for someone around that kind of around those leagues. So we'll see what happens. But he did finally get a goal again for Portland Timbers. Yes, against Chicago Fire. It was a late consolation to give them a chance, which they weren't able to turn into anything. They lost 2-1. First MLS game in charge for their new manager. They'd been doing really well, actually, under the interim boss. I think the new guy might have taken charge of the last game in the Leagues Cup as well. But a little bit of a slump there. But nice to see him get on the score sheet, because that is his first goal in MLS, his first goal for Portland Timbers, and technically speaking, his first professional club goal of all, because he did once score a very famous late winner with like 5 minutes to go against the Melbourne Victory in the season where the Phoenix made it to the semifinals, had their best ever finish. But if you remember that one, it was later, like a few days later, it was changed to have been an own goal, saying the deflection of the defender was the significant part of that, and he was adamant the whole time that that was my head on that ball. I should get the goal. And I had to go through a few different places because some stat websites count it as saying he scored one goal for the Wellington Phoenix, others don't. So I went to the sources and checked the A-League. What do they call it? The sort of like the big massive media guide things that they do with all stats from past seasons and stuff. I think that's Andy Howe's work, who's a famous stato over those sides. And they had him listed as 0 goals. So I'm going with that one as the final record. So unfortunately, he didn't score a goal for the Wellington Phoenix, but he did just score one for Portland. And of course, he did score one at the World Cup, the All Whites. And he actually has 3 goals for the All Whites. So it's 3 goals for his national team before he ever scored one that counted for his name at club level. But yeah, that's ticked off now. And I think that is an area of his game where it's like he's such a good player aerially. He should be a threat from like going forward for corner kicks and stuff like that. He should be able to get up and score a couple goals per season. Players like him that we've had in the past generally have, like Abby Erceg on the women's side, always scores a goal or 2 per season because she's so good at winning headers. Winston Reid would occasionally pop up with some pretty handy goals. Tommy Smith was a very good goal scorer. He'd get 3 or 4 a season during his peak years with Ipswich. When he actually played in MLS, I think was his best goal scoring season when he played that year with Colorado. So guys like that, Tyler Bindon as well should develop into someone who can chip in with goals as well. So those are nice things to have, even if you want to step down a little level. Nando Peineker's first year when he wasn't injury affected with Auckland FC, he scored 3 or 4 really important goals for them in that season. So goal scoring defenders, it's a nice trait. It's not the most important thing that you're going to do, but it's a very nice trait to have, as if you can during the course of each year pop up with a couple, and Sermon has that potential. So nice to see him get on the board, actually do that, replicating what he did with his goal against Egypt at the World Cup. It's definitely something he's capable of. And yeah, we'll see if he's still a Portland Timber player in 2 weeks. I would guess yes. I think he's more likely to stay than not just in this window, and then maybe at the end of the MLS season he considers a move. But it's one of them ones where it's like if the offer comes in, you can't really say no. So it's a matter of if someone is desperate enough to have him now that they go out and stump up a fee. Well, that's what we're waiting to see over the next 2 weeks, whether that happens. Callum McCowart, Tyler Bindon, Matt Dibley-Diaz loans, those types of moves is still plenty of stuff that may or may not happen over the coming fortnight.
You've also got a note in our news there about the goalkeepers. Max Crocombe and Alex Paulsen have some interesting situations. By the sounds of it, Alex Paulsen's going pretty well with Motherwell. He's settled into a groove there. And Max Crocombe's in a battle for his starting role, having been the All Whites goalkeeper at the World Cup.
Yeah, and I wonder if that dynamic might have switched now, because Crocombe looks like he wasn't the starter in week 1 for Millwall. That's actually nothing abnormal for him. It's the 4th year in a row he's not been the week 1 starter for his team. And in the previous 3 occasions, he pretty quickly turned that around in his favor. It might be a little bit tougher to do that in the championship than it was certainly in League One, in part because he doesn't have as many cup games to play in the meantime. So it's a little bit more about being patient. That's probably why it took him longer last season. But he has a track record now. So if the opportunity comes around, he will at least be trusted he's already being trusted as a backup. But so it's like the coach wouldn't hesitate to chuck him in because he's seen what he can do. But it does look like he might be the backup choice there. And if you're not playing, and Alex Paulsen is playing, and Alex Paulsen is playing awesome for Motherwell, who have not lost a game that he's played, and then they rested him on the weekend for a League Cup game and lost to a lower division team. Well, things are going quite well for Paulsen at the moment, which was absolutely not the case leading into the World Cup. Like I could not be convinced in any way that was not the right decision to have Max Crocombe starting those 3 games, because even if he hadn't played for a few months leading up to it, he was in really career best form before that, and Paulsen was in terrible form coming into the World Cup. Alex Paulsen has completely flipped that script around. He's been tremendous for Motherwell, a team that suits them much better. They're on a little bit of a European run at the moment as well. Got to beat Freiburg to get into the Conference League league phase. They've got 2 legs of those coming up, but he's played 6 or 7 games, 6 I think, and conceded 2 goals, and 1 was a penalty. And he's looking better at being able to be involved in the possession stuff, getting the ball at his feet and passing it around and just being more involved in the team, and more confidence stemming from that. His shot stopping is back at the levels we saw it in the A-League. There was a game in his first premiership game where he got targeted a little bit from the high balls, which is something that he was picked on a lot in Poland. And he dropped a couple, and amongst making some very good saves in a game that they won, but he did drop a couple, and so there was a little bit of like, well, yeah, there might be a weakness showing through. And everything I've seen from him in the 2 games he's played since, he's been flawless with those. He's been like, he's just straight away shrugged it off, been really decisive, when to come out and try catch the ball, when to punch it, solid hands, not fumbling those ones. Good communication, which is a key thing, because often when goalkeepers drop those, it's because their defender doesn't get in the way, doesn't get out of the way in time, so you bump into them, which is what causes you to drop the ball. That was at least the case with at least one of those ones in that previous game I was talking about. I think that was the game against Hibernian. That stuff has been solved very quickly, at least from the evidence of the last couple matches. So Paulsen is in tremendous form and is really turning things around and yeah, shrugging off everything that happened to him in a very difficult season last year. If you're picking on form, there's no question. If one guy's not playing and the other guy's in career best form, then and we've still got another month or so before the next All Whites squad will be named, so there's time for this to shift. But yeah, it does look like if there's one dynamic that might have changed from the World Cup to the next window, and I don't think there'll be a lot. Probably won't see Tommy Smith, but that was a World Cup specific call up that he had. They weren't calling him up in that capacity for friendly tours up until that point. And it's also not something people aren't even going to notice if Tommy Smith doesn't get picked, because it's not like he played those always games or anything. So there's like, I think it'll be there will be things that change between now and the next World Cup, and changes that are implemented, and players who come through because they're going to be playing in 4 years who are getting more opportunities. Like perhaps we might see Tyler Bindon starting a lot more instead of Michael Boxall for that reason. But I think the biggest dynamic shift that might have changed between then and now would be the goalkeeping one, because on form, Alex Paulsen is the guy. He wasn't a couple months ago, but he is now. And Crocombe, just by not being able to nail down a starting spot at Millwall, that might be enough to tilt that one back towards AP. But yeah, as I say, still another month to go. And also, to be honest, the third goalkeeping spot is is a pretty fascinating one as well, because Michael Veld is now the incumbent there. And he wasn't leading up until like right before the World Cup. He was a little bit of a surprise selection in the World Cup squad, hadn't been in all white squads, but was so good in the last few months of that season for Auckland FC that he worked his way in there, helped by being a bit more experienced in some of the other options there. But he's an A-League goalkeeper. Henry Gray's come into play in the A-League. Henry Gray was a guy who Darren Baisley mentioned a few times as like the goalkeepers who were in contention for that 4th spot. Ollie Sow was out injured, so he was gone. It was Michael Veld or Nick Sanev if you want an experienced option. It was Henry Gray or Case Sims if you wanted a sort of like a building towards the future type option. Give experience to the young guy who might have a chance to be a number 1 in the future, which is not a future that Michael Veld has. He's not going to be the number 1 goalkeeper when he's older than Alex Paulsen, who's better than him. But he is a guy who'll hang around and play the odd game here or there, and he'll be available for as long as he's around the A-League. It's those Oceania type games. It helps to be close. But if he's playing the same level as Henry Gray this season, well, there's a very direct comparison we can make, right, between the incumbent third choice and anyone else who wants to get into an all-white squad now as the goalkeeper. You're not challenging Crocombe or Paulsen straight, playing at the same level for a team who is a direct rival of track, like 2 really specific and easily comparable because of playing in the same league. let alone the fact that like two New Zealand goalkeepers are now in South African Premier League clubs, and Zach Jones having moved up a division in England. Nick Sanev has probably fallen off the back of the wagon as a third choice goalkeeper for Huddersfield Town, but like Joe Wallace is third choice at West Brom in a higher division. He's looking for a potential senior debut at some point this season, probably on loan, but we'll see how that goes. Not to mention like the depth at their two A-League clubs, where Joe Knowles should get a chance now that he's fit again to be Michael Vald's backup if Ollie Sale doesn't recover and get re-signed. Albie Kelly-Hield and Eamon McCarron behind Henry Gray at the Phoenix. Like it's a pretty stacked time for goalkeepers, and yeah, quite a few of them are coming up towards season, let alone Case Sims as well. If he don't really see him starting games at Gaius in Sweden, but if he were to go out on loan, or if the top guy were to get injured again, as happened last year and almost gave him a chance to sneak into the World Cup squad, well, he is playing at a pretty high level. He's certainly training at a pretty high level. He hasn't been playing a lot recently, but he's pretty close to that. Like it's a very competitive spot at the moment for the All Whites, which is interesting because it hasn't really been that for the football ferns. They're still working on trying to find out some depth, although Alina Santos' emergence in the last couple of years and recently signing with Southampton as well. So she's moving professional, finished up at university in the States. That'll help a whole lot because Annalite's had a lot of injuries, concussion related recently, which has really limited her last year or two. Vic Hessen is 34 or something like that. She's, realistically probably in the last couple of years of her career, although hoping to win a championship with the Wellington Phoenix, so she's hanging around. There's not a lot of depth behind those two, and Alina, well, those three now, because I think Santos moving professional puts her in the mix. And yeah, a lot of other goalkeepers who have been tried but haven't really nailed it down, whereas on the men's side we got a bunch of guys who all seem to be moving upwards in their careers. Like no one's stalling a whole lot except maybe Sanev, but that's, we can afford one or two of those, no dramas. Yeah, great times, but also terrible times to be a goalkeeper from if you're trying to get into the All Whites. Like great times in terms of the level that we're at, not so great in terms of how much competition you got to get through though, because there's plenty of that.
And we've also got a confirmation Finn McKenlay has got a job over in Ireland. It's a team that is last placed in the Irish second division. But of course, Finn McKenlay, I liked what he did at Auckland FC when he did play. I thought he was a good player in the CDM position, centre midfield as well. And he has apparently signed with Finn Harps in Ireland. Not a massive headline move, but shout out Finn McKenlay for joining Finn Harps.
Yeah, like you say, not a massive headline move. I kind of feel like he's capable of something more, but then also if you're leaving the A-League after only making 2 appearances, what's anyone else got to go by? He's effectively a National League player. I know he's got the A-League experience and he's been training with that team for 2 years, but in terms of what he's done in his playing career, he's effectively a National League player. So a National League player making a move to the Irish second tier is pretty good. Like, that's solid. That's actually mirrors another guy who was a CDM at the time when he made this move, but isn't anymore. Corbin Piper, when he left Birkenhead the first time, he went over and played second tier in Ireland for a better team than the one Finn McKenlay's landing at, but that should probably help McKenlay. He's only signed until the end of the season. There's about 9 games left. So it's like, here's a crap team. Go make them less crap. Show what you can do, and then either you re-sign with this team, or maybe this is an audition window that'll get you signed by a better team in Ireland, maybe even in the top division. Who knows? Like, it's not that far off from where Jago Godden it's like career progression, and he's playing games in the top division in Ireland. So, and as I say, Corbin Piper had a pretty solid year in the second division once upon a time, then came back, played for Birkenhead a little bit, and then got signed by the Wellington Phoenix. So there's it's a well-trodden path in its own way, and he's got a nice little window in the next couple of months to really audition for how the next phase of his professional career is going to go.
Right, let's finish with some cricket, and I did jump the gun because the New Zealand A top end T20 series didn't start last weekend. It starts this coming weekend. So that would probably clear up a bit of the clasher in Darwin after Bangladesh did have a cricket cartel test win against a cricket cartel nation. And I was thinking there's a lot of cricket going to be played in Darwin because they're playing a test match there. They've got like a bunch of teams, almost 10 teams playing a T20 tournament. But of course, that test series now moves to Mackay, and in comes the headline act, New Zealand Day at the top end T20 tournament. We've talked our way through a few squad selections, and I do have some squad battles that I am interested in for New Zealand Day whenever they do start their top end T20 series. We have 3 batters: Tim Robinson versus Bevan Jacobs versus Kartene Clark. And we know that Tim Robinson and Kartene Clark are more T20 hitters, but Kartene Clark is a T20 specialist at this moment. He plays a little bit of Ford Trophy, no Plunkett Shield, and a lot of Super Smash for ND. So, and these three guys fit nicely on the spectrum of batting talents because Kartene Clark is a T20 batter, T20 hitter. Tim Robinson is known as a T20 hitter, but he was very good in the longer formats last summer, his best season in the longer formats, and he has played a few ODIs for New Zealand. Then you get to Bevan Jacobs, who is just as good in first-class batting as he is in T20 batting. But everyone views Bevan Jacobs as a T20 hitter, even though he has proven to be very good at batting in all 3 formats for Auckland specifically. Tim Robinson and Kartene Clark are top-order batters, so I think there's an easy battle there as far as like which one of those 2 Black Caps level aggressive scorers is going to be more effective. But I put Bevan Jacobs in this category because he's also a Black Caps batter. He's played a few T20s for New Zealand, not quite as many as Tim Robinson, I don't think. And I think he's got all format potential for New Zealand. So with these 3 dudes, I am very interested in who can dominate this series. And if they're playing 5 or 6 games, then we're looking at 2 or 3 impressive scores. So which one of these batters as the leading batters in the squad in terms of Black Caps experience, which one of them is going to do the most? Tim Robinson's actually dipped away in T20 batting this year. Bevan Jacobs, I feel like he's getting better, and Kartene Clark made his debut earlier in the year, earlier this year, I think. So he's been all right so far. I think he had a 50-plus score in Bangladesh. So watch out. I'm going to be tracking which one of those 3 batters is most effective at the top end T20 tournament. You can bounce in with any questions, comments, queries, section by section.
Yeah, well, let's go section by section.
That is the section. So you can just say no comment and we can keep moving.
Yeah, okay. No comment on section 1. Moving on to section 2.
Then we got the wicket keepers, Mitch Hay versus Max Chu. Mitch Hay is the leader here. He's played all formats for New Zealand, Test 50 on debut. He's been pretty good in ODIs and all right in T20s. High strike rate, low average. But then you got Max Chu, who had an excellent summer for Otago last season, leading run scorer in all 3 formats for Otago, and he is far more solid across the 3 formats without the volatility of Mitch Hay below Black Caps. Mitch Hay, he's got the 40-plus first-class average, but he hasn't been, and he's got the high T20 strike rate, but his averages in one day in T20 cricket aren't as high, whereas Max Chu's pretty solid across all 3 formats. And I keep saying that Max Chu is going to be putting pressure on Mitch Hay for those wicket-keeping duties for the Black Caps over the next year or so. I think Max Chu is that good as a wicketkeeper entering the Black Caps mixer. He was part of the New Zealand Day tour of Sri Lanka earlier in the year. I think there were a couple of games where he has batted alongside Mitch Hay because their batting is they're both good enough at batting to be in the same team as long as you've got balance in other areas. So in theory, Mitch Hay should be dominating this T20 tournament as a Black Caps wicketkeeper, and one of, I think it's Mitch Hay, Dean Foxcroft, and Matt Fisher, who have played all three formats for the Black Caps, who are in this New Zealand A squad. So that speaks to where Mitch Hay sits in the Black Caps rankings, and yet Max Chu seems to be just as good as Mitch Hay in terms of a wicketkeeper batter position. Of course, Max Chu's a lefty, Mitch Hay's a righty, so it's going to be a fascinating battle there. Both are from the South Island, Mitch Hay from Canterbury, Max Chu from Otago.
Well, I do have a question about this one. Is this a battle you see contested over the coming years in all three formats? The Chu versus Hay thing?
Yes. I will bring up their stats right now, but I don't think they have like a strongest format. Max Chu has had some T20 jobs as a mark of his T20 ability. Like, he's had more T20 jobs, I think, than Mitch Hay. But Mitch Hay, he does have a T20 strike rate of 144. Max Chu's on 143, so it's fairly similar. So that's good stuff for Max Chu. But Mitch Hay averages 45 in first class batting. Max Chu averages 35. One day batting, Mitch Hay averages 22.5. Max Chu averages 26. And then Hay averages 18 in T20 batting. Max Chu averages 22. So their stats, aside from the difference in first class batting, which does include Max Chu batting way down the order to start his career with Otago, he debuted a few years earlier than Mitch Hay. They've got pretty similar career stats, give or take a few different, like a bit of variation. And we've seen, like, Mitch Hay has a T20 international record of 11 average, 125 strike rate. That's pretty weak. So maybe Max Chu could realistically do better than that. But in 7 ODI innings, Mitch Hay has an average of 31 with a strike rate of 104. That is excellent in a small sample size. I don't know if Max Chu can do that in his first 10 ODIs for New Zealand, but he could. And of course, Mitch Hay scored 61 runs on Test debut. Max Chu can do that. And they're similar ages. Max Chu is 26 years old. Mitch Hay is 25 years old. So right now, Mitch Hay's played 1 Test, 10 ODIs, 12 T20 internationals for New Zealand. He's a year younger than Max Chu. That suggests he's well ahead of Max Chu in all three formats. But I think we're going to see Max Chu overtake someone else like Dane Cleaver, because Dane Cleaver was involved in the Black Caps tour of Bangladesh earlier this year, but he was not part of the tour of West Indies. Tom Latham was the wicketkeeper in the West Indies, and Mitch Hay was the backup. That was ODI cricket, but in T20 cricket earlier this year, it was Dane Cleaver in Bangladesh. So Max Chu, I think, will overtake some of the veterans, and then he'll get into a very interesting battle with Tom Latham for the ODI role. You're going to have Tim Seifert doing his T20 jobs, so that will leave a lot of space for Mitch Hay and Max Chu to compete in the T20 international duties. And Max Chu is just as good at first-class batting right now, given his last 2 seasons, as Mitch Hay, and I don't see any difference in their wicket-keeping ability. So yes, I do think their battle goes across all 3 formats, even though Mitch Hay is notably ahead right now. And then we both are in the one-day squad for New Zealand Day for the following series after the top-end T20 tournament.
And as we've said in the past, that them both being in the squad doesn't necessarily mean one or the other plays. They might well both play because they're also good enough to get in the team as batters, and goes without saying, excellent glove men too. And we saw in the last Black Caps Test series with Tom Blundell against England how valuable that is when you have a keeper who can who can who can get you wickets, who can turn good bowling into wickets by their glove work. And these two are also pretty well renowned from what I gather on the fielding side of the position as well. So yeah, good stuff.
Then we've got a seeming all-rounder battle between Christian Clark and Josh Clarkson. We got two Clarks and a Clarkson in the squad. Mohamed Abbas could be in this battle because I think he's going to be bowling lefty seam, and I'm always fascinated by his workloads as a lefty seamer, because when we're thinking, the Black Caps don't have a lefty seamer, that's why Ben Lister keeps getting selected, because he's the only lefty seamer. Mohamed Abbas is a lefty seamer, and he can bowl 130 k's per hour. So if you may not have an opening bowler lefty seamer, which we do have in the pipeline with Thomas O'Connor and Ray Toole, who's always awesome in domestic cricket, but you've got Mohamed Abbas, who is an excellent batter and a interesting lefty seamer. So don't overlook Mohamed Abbas in that category. But the Christian Clark versus Josh Clarkson battle is very interesting because Josh Clarkson has played a lot of cricket for New Zealand. And this is the thing, like, you get into Black Caps depth and people think people are surprised at Black Caps depth because suddenly they see it on a high profile stage. But in between, guys are playing a lot of cricket for New Zealand. Like Josh Clarkson's already played 13 T20 internationals, maybe not a lot, but he has played a sneaky amount. 13 T20 internationals, 6 ODIs, whereas Christian Clarkson only played 4 ODIs, 1 T20. And Josh Clarkson's a better T20 player than Christian Clark, just straight up. Josh Clarkson's been fantastic in T20 cricket for a long time. And he was also one of the most dominant seamers in Ford Trophy last summer. So his Ford Trophy bowling and his dominance of Ford Trophy bowling led to Christian Clark being selected in ODIs. That is, Josh Clarkson's dominant Ford Trophy bowling led to Christian Clark getting ODI selection. So that was a weird mix. But that points to how good Josh Clarkson has been, especially like he's played winning roles for CD in basically every format, and he's a monster hitter. He can play as a fourth or fifth seamer in T20 cricket. He's probably a better T20. He's definitely a better T20 batter than Christian Clark. But Christian Clark, we've seen him take wickets against India in ODIs. He's been pretty solid in his Black Caps experience right now. And even though Christian Clark seems like the better bowler, he's not, like in the West Indies, he wasn't like 135 Ks. He was 128, 129, maybe 130. And Josh Clarkson can do all that. So Josh Clarkson can be a better T20 batter than Christian Clark, and he can be just as good as a bowler as Christian Clark. I think Christian Clark might be better suited to the longer formats in terms of bigger picture, but in the T20 tournament coming up, Christian Clark's a Black Cap. He's like the more recent Black Cap. But Josh Clarkson is a Black Cap as well, and I think he is of very similar talent to Christian Clark. And this is a type of tournament I would be thinking that Josh Clarkson could dominate and push for more Black Caps cricket.
Yeah, nice. No comment.
Jaden Lennox versus Adi Ashok. This maybe shouldn't be a battle because Jaden Lennox is one of the best ODI bowlers in the world right now. But Jaden Lennox has only played 1 T20 international for New Zealand. but he has also been very good in T20 bowling. Like, he started out with CD as a Super Smash bowler, and he's always been one of the best T20 bowlers in domestic cricket. Then he built out the longer formats to the point where he may be selected. Like, he may be, I think they'll always select Ajaz Patel and Jaden Lennox at CD. But there could be situations where Jaden Lennox is just better than Ajaz Patel in Plunket Shield and Ford Trophy. That is something to watch out for this summer. Addy Ashok, though, I think, like, I know nothing about Darwin cricket conditions, but I don't think they're going to be, it's going to be different to the West Indies probably, right? So Jaden Lennox in the West Indies, I think he can be very useful. Jaden Lennox in India earlier this year, very useful. But Ashok, with his leggies, his wrong-ins, flippers, doosras, cowabungas, whatever he's got in his arsenal, that could be very useful in a T20 tournament like what we're going to have at the top end of Australia. They've actually both played one T20 international for New Zealand. Addy Ashok hasn't been as good in his 3 ODIs, but Ashok's best format is T20 bowling, not as good as Jaden Lennox. But in this context, I think Ashok could be the best spinner for New Zealand A, if he's at his best. Otherwise, it'll be Jaden Lennox continuing to be one of the most notable developments of 2026 for the Black Caps.
How's Ashok's Plunket Shield career looking? I know he's had a few hauls, but I think he's also got hauls from like you bowl a lot, you take wickets. You have long spells, you hang in there. Not necessarily like the, I don't know, 7 for 40 type ripping through teams, but is he sort of bringing himself into, it'd be a year or two away at least from like test considerations, but is he getting himself towards that?
Yeah, definitely. And he's a, mid-30s in first-class cricket average. That's good.
Yeah, for a spinner in New Zealand, that is good.
Like most New Zealand spinners are early 30s at best, better than 30. I think Ashok can be an all-format bowler for New Zealand. And it's notable, like, usually Auckland, especially last summer when Rohit Kumar joined Auckland, they were often playing 2 spinners. That's because Ashok needs to be in your team every format. So I do think he does have long form potential for New Zealand. And he was excellent at the start of the Ford Trophy last summer off the top of my head as well. Different, obviously, to Jaden Lennox. Jaden Lennox is more controlled and pace variation and stuff like that. But this could, it's probably better suited to Tim Pringle, but the Mitchell Santner East Sodhi combination is there. Whether it's Jaden Lennox and Ashok, whether it's Tim Pringle and Ashok, it's all there for you. Then we get to Ben Lister versus Zach Gibson. Ben Lister, to me, he needs wickets to stay in the Black Caps mix. And he enjoys a pretty comfortable selection zone where Black Caps need a seamer in their squad. Ben Lister fills the last spot. That's happened a few times over the last couple of years. He's solid for the Black Caps when he has played. Always talk about his quirky lefty style, moving the ball away from right-handers. If Ben Lister is who his ranking tells us he is, and by ranking I mean he's always at the end of Black Cap squads, which means he's in the Black Cap squads, but there's plenty of seamers ahead of him, and maybe not the top tier elite Black Cap squads. He should be very good at this tournament because he's got a different style of lefty seam, and he does have plenty of experience in domestic cricket. He's got a bit of experience for the Black Caps. He should be effective. I don't know if he will be. But then we go Zach Gibson. And Zach Gibson is the freshest player in this kind of wider Black Caps grouping that we have here with New Zealand A. This will be his first involvement with New Zealand A. So the Ben Lister Zach Gibson battle. Zach Gibson's a righty who does seem to bowl with good pace, good movement. It's like Ben Lister's one of the lowest ranked seamers at the Black Caps level, and Zach Gibson's one of the newest seamers in the wider Black Caps level. So can Zach Gibson offer a challenge to Ben Lister as far as the seam depth goes, regardless of whether they're lefty righty? I want to see which one of those two is more effective, because it would shake things up if Zach Gibson suddenly shows that he has the talent and skill to perform at the higher levels. It's just another seamer on the rise, and we got plenty of those outside of Ben Lister and Zach Gibson as well.
Right on. So what teams are they playing for this thing?
They are playing Adelaide Strikers Academy, ACT Comets,
right.
HH Kingsman Academy, Victoria Academy, Bangladesh High Performance, Hobart Hurricanes Academy, South Australia, Tasmania, Nepal, all of them.
Everyone is everyone.
Apparently. Except for Cricket Cartel Nations, because they're just doing their thing. Righto.
And that
is the niche case for this week. Big up everyone. Appreciate your support. Onwards and upwards. Stay tuned across the platforms. Big up, kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Church.